Hey, what's going on, guys? Today's video is going to be on how to build Kotobukiya's new Titanomachia Strato Hound model kit. Let's get into it. And just a little background information for you guys while we're taking a look around the box and getting into the contents of the box here. Titanomachia is a series of 1/12 scale plastic model kits here designed by Naoki. And the Strato Hound here is the second release out in the line. The first release, the Gale Hound, was like a male character. Obviously with the Strato Hound here, we have a female character. It's a decent sized box, so it looks like we've got a good amount of plastic inside, and around on the outside of the box we've got some more information, but everything's all in Japanese here. Our MSRP for this kit is going to be 7,200 yen, and you can get an idea of what's going to be included as far as weapons, accessories, posability. It looks like she's got a gun that can be mounted onto the side of the leg, a kind of lance, spear sort of weapon, as well as a shield there. We can see a little bit about some of the interlocking armor and the gimmicks that we've got in store for the main kit, some of the weapons there. And there she is next to the Gale Hound kit, so you can get an idea of how the two of those kits are going to look side by side. And of course, all the parts are going to be interchangeable. Customization, you can of course swap the weapons and accessories between the two of them, as seen there in that photo. For our contents inside here, we've got all of our runners, and we should, yep, here we go, have some included water slide decals in there as well. It looks like we've got decals for the eyes, a couple of markings, and then a couple of like big letter markings here too, or Roman numeral markings, I should say, which look pretty cool. So those are going to be there in white. We got our instruction manual here, which is very nice. And then on the inside, it's not only going to give us a whole bunch more information there, again, all in Japanese, and a nice character illustration as well. It's also going to show us our parts list, including letting us know which parts are not going to be used. That's going to be those grayed out parts right there. Those will be leftovers. The instructions are going to be pretty straightforward. All the text is of course going to be here in Japanese as always, but the part numbers are just there. As you can see, A27, A23, pretty straightforward. You don't need to know any Japanese to be able to put this together. That said, if you're going to be building a lot of these plastic models, I recommend at least trying to learn katakana, Japanese katakana. For example, this one under I5 there says black, so it lets you know this is the black version of the part. Usually that's indicated when we have multiple of a particular runner, maybe in different colors. Maybe that same eye runner is in here in both black and silver, because you can see this one up here is also from the eye runner, but it says silver. So if we have the same runner in multiple colors, being able to read that katakana is helpful to be able to identify that this I3 part is going to be from the silver runner, not the black runner. There's lots of resources online for learning how to read Japanese katakana. It's pretty straightforward. It's probably the easiest alphabet of Japanese out of its 3 different text alphabets to be able to read. And there's lots of resources online, but I do have my own video on the topic too if you guys want to check that out. Our color guide is here in the back, as well as the decal guide. This as well is all in Japanese, but again, as you can see, it's all in katakana, so you should be able to read that. That said, it's pretty much black, silver, light blue, off-white kind of skin tone. Pretty straightforward as far as the colors go for this kit, if you're planning on sticking to the official colors, which I'm not. You do have an option of using your pre-printed face here, or there is here on the G-Runner an unprinted face if you prefer to use those waterside decals, maybe repaint that or do something custom with that yourself. We have a pre-painted part here as well, a clear black part with a little bit of blue painted on the side of that for the visor for the helmet. Our hand parts here on the X-Runner are going to be in a softer black plastic there, giving you a few different options between closed fists, weapon holding hands, and open hands. We've got a few different clear parts here. Runner M is a plain clear part there for the shield. Runner J here is in clear black for a couple of clear black parts there, which look really nice. The hair parts are going to be here on Runner F in a very, very light silver metallic kind of light gray color there. We do have some skin tone parts included as well here on the C Runner. And the rest of the kit is going to be either molded in black or in silver here. The molded silver does look really nice. And taking a close-up look at some of these parts, you can see there is a lot of really nice detail on there, which is going to be really great to bring out on the kit once it's all put together. And here too on Runner N, for example, this is going to be the 3 parts, which is going to make up one of the handgun, of which we have 2 of for this kit actually. But you can see all that really great detail on there. So let's get to work getting all the parts cut out and separated in here so that we can start putting the kit together, and in the meantime brainstorm some ideas on how we might want to customize this, not only with just different colors, but also possibly some different weapons or something like that. So in the meantime, let me finish getting all the parts ready here, and then we'll continue on. Now, I like to cut out all the parts and separate them into a bin like this just because it makes the building process more efficient for me. As I'm going along with the build, I'm not flipping through and going back and forth from this runner to that runner and everything's all cut out. All the parts that I need for that particular section are already all cut out. I'll go through and then remove all the remaining nubs for all the parts from each section by section, and build the kit in that way. It's just what I found works best for me. One thing you're going to want to look out for here on this clear part for runner M is a pretty big gate right here, so you're going to want to make sure to cut that pretty far away from the part, just so you're not putting too much pressure on the part. You don't want to have that crack and splinter into the clear part. So as you can see, I've left a whole bunch of that gate still connected on, and then I'm going to do a second cut where there's much less stress on the part, and then I'm going to use a glass file actually on this to file that down. On this clear black piece, not only do we have these nub marks that you're going to want to use the glass file on, but also that mold line right there, which you can see, and the glass file will be really helpful to get rid of that as well. But alright, so here I got the base kit all built up, and this is an important step just to kind of get a better visual idea of what the kit looks like on its own, so then you can kind of start getting your creative juices flowing and thinking about like, okay, now what do I want to do to customize this, to make it my own? What are the next steps going to be for me? So this is always helpful to me to just kind of build the kit up, see what it looks like, and then I can address different areas where I'm going to plan on changing the kit. And also you need to consider what you get with the kit, what it comes with, and then what you may ultimately want to use and not use. So with this kit, we have our shield, which I think is pretty interesting there, considering that it's got this big clear part. That could certainly be something interesting, which we might leave clear or we might not. I might end up actually painting that or painting it into like a clear color. I think could also look kind of interesting, and then with a decal on there. So this is something I think we're probably going to end up keeping that. Our optional head, though, probably not. I do want to keep the character's face on there, and though you could put the eyes on the head in here with the visor, and that is a cool part there with that clear black part. I think I'm just going to opt for the normal head here with the hair and everything, just because I think that just kind of looks more visually interesting. And then we've got our handguns. Now these do come with some fancy holster attachment pieces here, which you can plug onto the side of the hips of the unit, and again, these are pretty nice. I'm not really too big of a fan of pistols usually as far as weaponry goes for my model kits, so probably going to end up just omitting those. But like I said, we've got two, and you've got left and right side holsters for those, so you could have both, or you could have just one or the other, depending on your choice. And then her main weapon here, this is this fold out staff lance spear sort of weapon, which also looks really cool. I think I'm ultimately going to end up omitting this one as well. This one also has a connection piece, which I've got stuck on there at the moment. The connection piece will allow you to actually plug onto the back side again here for storage. That's just on a ball joint too, so it has a nice kind of adjustment piece for that. But yeah, it's a very interesting weapon in that you have your handle here. You also have this part actually extends out or collapses in for another attachment point, so you could hang on to the weapon here and here, for example, at multiple points, otherwise here as well. You can also separate it into two weapons also if you wanted to. Have this big axe weapon and this sort of like also sort of axe sword style weapon here. So there's definitely some cool stuff that you could do with these weapons. And sometimes, while I may not want to use the weapon on the kit, it still could be cool to just have this like mounted onto the kit. Like I said, you can just connect this onto the backpack or something, even if it's not going to be held in the hand. But I think for my purposes with this kit, I'm just going to omit it entirely. As sad as that may be, something that I learned from one of my university professors. She had a saying, she used to say, sometimes you have to kill your babies, and sometimes that means that even though you have something really cool here that would be very interesting to use, I think I'm just going to omit that. And so that leaves me with thinking, okay, we're gonna keep the shield, and then what else are we gonna do with this? We do have some very interesting hand option parts as far as those go too. Between your closed fists, you got these cool open expressive hands, so it could just have one open expressive hand here on this side, and then just keep the shield on the one side. And we've got our weapon holding hands, so I think it would make sense to come up with something to hold in the hand. And I was looking through my bag of leftover parts and weapons and stuff from other kits, and I came across this bazooka, which if I remember correctly is from a Jagan kit. I don't remember exactly which one. I think it's maybe the Stark Jagan or one of the HG Jagan kits came with this bazooka, but I think this is actually a really good fit to have her just hanging onto this bazooka. The size actually fits really quite well. And I think the hand option, the trigger finger weapon holding hand here, will maybe work. Let's see here. If not, this is a relatively straightforward modification. I think I probably will have to modify the handle. It's a kind of tight fit and it's a little bit awkward. I think I can sand down the handle a little bit to get that to have a little bit better grip on there, but actually holds on to that quite well. Now, there's a couple of things that I will need to do with this. Number one, it does have a seam line down the middle of that, but also here at the end, this bit at the end there, also the seam line goes through that. So I think what I can actually do is maybe just cut that off and just use a different piece here at the end. I've got this P113 set of Kotobukiya like thruster nozzle detail parts, and that one in particular is just right about the right size and shape, I think, for what we could possibly do with this. So alright, so it's going to take a little bit of time for that glue to dry, and I'll have to finish up removing that seam line. I sanded or filed down the handle a little bit so it's a much better fit in the hand, and our new back end piece we can also glue onto here once the seam line removal process is all done. So for the time being, we can just test out kind of how this is going to look. We can see how this is going to look on our kit here. And I gotta say, I think that's a pretty good fit. That looks pretty awesome. I do really like the simple, kind of very utilitarian look of the bazooka, and it's a very nice kind of juxtaposition to the kit design overall, which has this very detailed cyberpunk almost sort of design to it. I think the bazooka is a really nice match for that. But I do want to add, I think, a little bit more to this. So I was looking at some different option sets that I have, and I thought there's some cool armor pieces in here in this option set from Kotobukiya, and some of these different armor pieces might be pretty good to use in our various hardpoints that we have around on this kit. So I'm gonna clip off a couple of these and see where they might be a good fit. The other nice thing about these pieces is that on the back side it's just a simple hardpoint. So actually what we can do is just take our runner and just cut a few pieces here off the runner, and we can actually just use these as straight peg connection pieces to test out how the armor is going to look here on the kit. And all right, looking at this, it looks like we have a couple of different interesting options. I could put this larger piece like here on the side of the hip, which would make it sort of like a kind of big side skirt, or could opt for this smaller piece there on the side of the hip. Also, I think that also could look pretty good, but I think actually using this larger piece and actually inverted rather than pointing down, just point it up here on the side of the thigh like that, sort of like extending basically what is already here on the side of the thigh. This armor piece already kind of goes up and to the side like that, and adding this sort of extends that out and up more. Now this is out a little bit too far. I can actually cut the peg down a little bit so that it's a little bit tighter fit maybe. Let's see. On there, something like that I think looks pretty good, and so I think I can add one to the other side as well. Now another option that could look interesting for this is maybe add it up on the shoulder, but the shoulder armor itself, like what is already existing here on the kit, I want to keep that because I just like the way that that fits the kind of overall silhouette, and adding onto that just kind of, it just looks a little bit unnatural. I know it's kind of like way up there right now, but it's just kind of adding up onto the height where it's just not really, doesn't look like anything that necessarily really would make sense. So to plug those holes up in the shoulder armor, I'm going to use some of these O-bolts here from Wave. These come in a few different sizes here, and as you can see, the 3mm size is the size that I've been using quite a lot of just because they're really useful for kits like this. So here we have a few of this one particular style that I've got a couple of left here on this particular one. I have another set of these, but these 4 I think will work well for our purposes with this kit. So just gonna drop these into both the shoulder armor and also on the sides of the hips as well, where we're gonna opt to not use any armor pieces there. There we go, like that. Now we have a nice little detail there instead of a hole, so that looks good. And by the way, with those 2 armor plates added there onto the sides of the thigh, I'm liking how that looks, gives it a kind of more heavily armored sort of look, at least in that one particular area. Anyway, Alright, so we're coming along. Then there was one more thing that caught my eye while I was just taking a look at some different parts, and that was this set here from Kotobukiya as well. This is the propellant tank option set, and there's two different versions of this actually. And naturally, I do have both versions. There's a square type and a round type. This is the square type, which I thought would fit well with just kind of the overall details and shapes of this kit. Now obviously there's a lot of rounded surfaces, but you can see there's like some different hard angles and square bits here and there as well. So I thought for adding onto the backpack, can try adding basically like a flight pack with these parts. So let me go ahead and build up some of these parts and kind of play around with these, and then we'll see what I can make that could look pretty convincing as some sort of like a flight pack here for our unit. All right, so after messing around with these parts a little bit, here's an idea of kind of what I've come up with for the moment temporarily, and I'll show you what we've got going on here. Now we can go something like this, which uses these kind of main thrusters there and the fuel tanks going, and this is just kind of, the problem is a little bit more substantial than what I wanted. I wanted to have like a kind of subtle flight pack there at the back, and maybe not anything quite this large. But let me get the bazooka in hand and kind of adjust the pose a little bit and take a look around this. And honestly, I think it could work. It's a little bit larger than what I was thinking. There's a couple of bits that I still want to change, and I think these backpack parts also give us some more opportunity to add some more detailed parts around here and just kind of overall make this look a little bit better. This is just sort of to explore the idea and just kind of see how that might look. But I honestly think that I think it can work. So with these backpack parts, there is going to be a few more seams to get rid of on a couple of those bits. And like I said, I want to change some of these parts. Like for example, these hexagonal thruster bells got to go. I'm just not a fan of how those look. And honestly, these parts here on the top that kind of hinge like that, not super into this just kind of plain rectangular look for these parts, so might change those up as well. But let me just get back to the main kit for a second here, and let me talk about what I'm going to do for the next step, and that is just overall sanding and cleanup on this. Now there are a number of seam lines on this kit. Here down in the front of the leg, for example, between these two parts, there's a little bit of a seam right there. Around here on the back of this collar piece, there's a seam right there as well. And normally I would not want to leave seams on a kit, but on this kit, just because of the design of this suit, there's just kind of these like details all over the place. It's not like it doesn't make sense that there would be a seam line right there. Now this is probably the worst offender here on the back of this collar piece, and I may end up changing my mind on that. I may end up getting rid of that one, but in other areas it just kind of makes sense that there would be seams between different sections of the armor here. So I'm not going to do a whole lot of seam line removal, but there is some just further sanding that's going to be required just to get this paint ready. And then there's mold lines, like these mold lines here on the front of these ankle parts that will also need to be sanded down. So there's a number of different mold lines. So let me go ahead and work on that. I'll work on cleaning up some of the seam lines on the weapons. I'll work on the backpack a little bit, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about how we're going to approach painting this kit. All right, so I've got all of the modification done, all the parts washed and dried, and now just getting ready to do some priming and get into painting on these. But I will show you kind of how the backpack modifications ended up going. So this would be the one section here for the right side. The left side would be mirrored, but as you can see, it's pretty much just as you saw it before, but with a little bit of changes. I added a couple of detail parts there, slightly reshaped this part here on the top. The end of that was kind of angled at a different angle. And then the thruster bell I swapped for a different piece that I felt was kind of a bit more highly detailed, matching the design of the suit a little better. And then the fuel tank is just pretty standard, didn't really modify anything on that except for removing some seam lines on a couple of pieces. And that was really kind of the bulk of the work that was really needed on this. There's a couple of bits that I wanted to add, and then it's mostly just seam line removal, so that's pretty straightforward. I'm gonna be using a white primer on everything just so I can get some nice bright colors on this, and that's what I wanted to do for the color scheme for this. I wanted a kind of nice, bright, sort of funky, unique, different color scheme. The main color of the suit is going to be gray, but not just kind of a plain gray. In this case, it's blue fog white. It felt fitting to use some Nazca colors, being that this is a Naoki design, so use some Naoki paints. And this is like a blue gray. It is highly blue though, as far as the gray goes, and it's not very white at all, but anyway, it's just kind of the name. It's just a blue gray, which is going to be the main color. And then for the accent colors, which is basically all the parts that were originally silver, Going to be using these two for my accent colors here. Another Nazca color, this is Mandarin Orange, and then part of their Evangelion color series here, this is Eva Green 02 in that line for a nice bright green color. It looks on camera a lot brighter than it is. It's not quite that like fluorescent bright, but it is pretty bright there. So I'm not going to be using a ton of that, but we'll be using a little bit of those colors there. And then I wanted to use a couple more unique colors here as well. It's Virtual On color Homura Azuki is a very interesting kind of pale maroon sort of color there. I really like the look of that. And I think that I'm going to use that actually for the bazooka, which I think will be very interesting to have the bazooka in this kind of very unique color for a weapon like that. And then for some of the other mechanical bits, like for some parts for the backpack, some parts here for the shield as well, going to be using this Chubu Mechatro Wigo color here. This is number 07 Ash in the Mechatro Wigo color line, which is basically sort of like a tannish gray kind of color there, which will look pretty cool for some mechanical bits. It's going to be some interesting colors here for this, which I think should make it pretty unique. As far as the hair color goes, I'm not totally sure on that quite yet. I think probably what I'm going to want to do is maybe use like a clear purple on that and just spray a little bit of clear purple on it just to make this slightly colored anyway. And then for the shield, I had something interesting in mind here for this too. So what I want to do is I want to keep it clear on the front, and so what I'm going to do is cover this with a piece of masking tape on the front and only spray the back side with, I'm not entirely sure yet, maybe probably like a silver or something, and then so it will be silver that you'll be able to see like through the clear part on the front, which should give it a pretty interesting look, I think so. Okay, everything's painted, and I'm at that state where I'm not entirely sure about this, but I think it's gonna be one of those things that once I start putting it together and I kind of like seeing how the colors really look together, I'll have a better understanding. But just to kind of recap here, here's some of our orange colors, which actually there was only one part, actually 4 different parts, but one part of the kit that needed to be masked, and that was in order to get the orange as a kind of stripe there on the shoulder in order to match the ones on the legs there. That is not a separate part, so that part did need to be masked. Let's see how that came out. Hopefully no issues. There we go. Not super perfect, but that'll be fine. I think that'll work just fine for that. But anyway, there's those colors. And the blue fog white definitely came out a little bit lighter. I mean, like, it looks pretty much exactly like it should look, but I mean, I was expecting it maybe to be slightly darker, maybe with a black base instead of a white primer, would have come out a little bit darker, but that also I think will probably be fine once we get through everything here. The green is also definitely pretty neon bright green. It's very Evangelion, and actually looking at these like color combinations of the orange and green accents, just thinking like, okay, I'm basically painting Evangelion colors here. And the bazooka here in this Homura Azuki color also, it's going to be quite interesting. It's a bit darker than I was thinking too, but I think again that'll be a very unique color for sure. We'll see how this looks once everything's all together. And lastly, the last of the previously mentioned colors here, this tan color looks quite nice, and actually looking at this while painting, I was thinking it's very similar to like a duck egg green, so if I ever run out of this color, it's pretty close to like duck egg green from Mr. Color, which is a lot easier to get than these Mechatro paints there from Gaia. Now, I did do a little bit more on the skin tone parts. I used some Mr. Color Last Viz. This is the clear pale orange, and it's gonna be kind of hard for you guys to see, but if you can see, there did do like a little bit of shading here, and this is just directly on the plastic here. I didn't paint the skin tone parts, but I did want to do a little bit of shading and basically just adjusted the skin tone ever so slightly just to make it look a bit more lifelike there. So here's how the shield part came out. It's not perfect, but I'm happy enough with this. So actually, I did what I was mentioning about putting a piece of masking tape on the front and then just painted the backside basically. But first I painted the backside with this Prism Purple Green, which is a just kind of clear iridescent color. It's usually meant to be like mixed in with a different color or something, but that will give it like a slight iridescence there. That purple green is what it's meant to be, kind of the color that you're seeing. So it gives it a little bit of color, and then gave it a very light coat of just Mr. Color Gun Chrome. Then on top of that, actually, like on the back side anyway, these layers are just done here on the back, and here's how it's gonna look from the front, which is quite interesting. And lastly, for the hair parts, I used a little bit of this lavender here from Mr. Color, and did it at a kind of a bit of a gradient with it lighter at the top and a little bit darker here at the bottom just to give our hair a little bit of the color. And again, this is just painted directly onto the plastic without any surface or anything. So the parts themselves were already a kind of like pearlescent white kind of color, and then just painted a very light lavender over the top of that. So like I said, the colors are interesting. Let me go ahead and start putting some of these sections back together, and we'll see how the colors actually look once the parts are together. All right, so yeah, here's the first top part of the torso anyway, just so at least we can just see all the colors together and get an idea of kind of how everything's looking. And number one, I think it's looking okay. I think it's going to be fine. Actually, the medium blue-gray color actually looks exactly like it would work super well for like a Jin, like a Gundam kit, actually. But maybe it's just because these shoulders are also sort of like Jin shaped anyways. That's why it's making me think of that. But yeah, I think the colors are going to work, but I can definitely tell what this needs is some panel lining in the details and also some detail painting. So there's going to be a couple little bits here where I'm going to want to paint in some of these details as well. And then just obviously all the panel lining, all these details here. So I'm gonna go ahead and give this a coat of clear gloss and get to work on some panel lining and detail painting on her. And I think that will really help to just kind of tie everything together. All right, so before I get into applying some wash on this, I applied the gloss coat and two things happened. And I wanted to talk about this because I think it's illustrative of just kind of the things that can happen when you're in the modeling process. So I realized that this tan color that I was using for some of these mechanical bits, I was using for these like hexagonal parts on there too. And it was too close to the skin tone color, and it basically made it look like it was like a part of the arm showing through here, and here it was like a kind of odd like two-tone skin color right there. So it just wasn't really, it looked a bit awkward. So I ended up repainting those here, as you can see, in this darker, like almost black color. This is another Nazca color here, Frost Matte Black is the name. It is like definitely a dark gray, and once the matte coat is sprayed on there, it'll definitely even lighten up even more. And you can also see, unfortunately, the paint also got a little chipped up on those parts already just from putting these parts together, so I'll have to touch that up a little bit. The decals are all done, everything's gloss coated, so I'm ready to move ahead with some panel line wash and just kind of some filtering that I want to do over the entirety of the suit. But there was one more problem here with the shield. When I was doing my gloss coating, I thought I'll spray a coat of gloss coat over the shield too, because the glossiness of like the natural glossiness of the clear plastic and the decals didn't really match. So like the decals were standing out too much, so I thought I'll give it a good coat of gloss coat over the whole thing. That'll just kind of even it all out, make it all look nice and glossy. What I ended up doing is actually kind of fogging the clear plastic, and I'm not exactly sure what the reason was, if it was the weather, maybe it was a little bit too humid, or if it's just like that's just how it works. I'm not sure if I've ever really tried spraying clear coat on gloss before. This is what I was actually using, SMS clear gloss. So yeah, it ended up fogging the clear parts a little bit, and then I thought, all right, well, what can I do? And in the past, what I would have done is maybe try dipping the part in some Future, like Pledge Future floor. What's the product anyway? Pledge Future. It's just like a gloss coat that's used for floors, but a lot of people use it for modeling as well, and it works particularly well on clear parts. You know, people have differing opinions on that. I've used it with good success in the past before. I didn't have any of that. I don't have any, and so I thought, why don't I try dipping the part in the clear gloss? So I poured some of this out into like a little dish that I could dip this in, but what ended up happening was that I was trying to avoid the clear from like going over the edge and actually coming onto the back of the shield, but I couldn't really, just because of the shape of it. There was no way to avoid it, so I gave it a full dunk. And two things happened. Number one, the silver paint on the back got reactivated, and you can see it kind of started to melt away at the silver paint on the back, so that got messed up. And then the front also got this weird finish, and you guys will see that. I mean, like, in all honesty, it could work depending on what you want to go for. I mean, like, it doesn't look awful. Before I try completely stripping that, there is one other thing that I do want to try. But I'm also then just kind of curious, because I do want to put decals on there. So if I strip everything off here and I have it stripped down back to a clear part again, then what am I going to do when I put decals back on it again? And I do want to give it, you know, a nice gloss coat. I'm not sure if the same thing's going to happen again. So it's basically just going to be an experimental piece for the time being, and we'll try and see what's going to work on it. So one thing I want to try here is just, this is 1000 grit sandpaper. Sand this a little bit and just kind of see what it does. So sanding it down pretty much had the effect of what I was expecting. It smoothed it down a little bit, but if I keep going at it, it's going to start to damage the decal, which you could do intentionally, and that's a lot of times what people will do when they're weathering. They'll intentionally sand or file down the decals in order to add to the weathering aspect of it. Basically all it kind of did was smooth out some of the roughness there, as you can see, and it did start to damage the decal here a little bit. But I don't know. Like I said, it doesn't look awful, and I just wanted to put it into the rest of the parts here just to kind of see how it will look with the other parts in there. And I basically have two options now. Just move forward with this as it is. And I think, you know, once I'm doing my filtering and Pentaline wash and everything on this, just include this part. Don't try to keep this as like a glossy part. Just go ahead and just make it matte finish, as it already kind of has this matte finish look to it. And you can still kind of tell it's like a somewhat clear, somewhat silvery kind of part, and even with the matte finish on it later, it will still have that appearance. Or the other option would be to just completely strip it down and start from scratch. So I think what I'm going to do for the time being is I'm just going to move forward with this as it is, because the only thing is that if I were to strip this down and redo it, I'm not exactly sure how I would necessarily redo it, because it's kind of an odd, awkward piece. I don't really like the fact that it's plain clear. I don't want to keep it in plain clear. I want to do something with it, either paint it totally opaque, or like I was doing before, try to keep it like clear on the front and then like silver or something on the back. But I don't know. I think in all honesty, for how different and unique I've already made the colors on this, the look of this kind of fits in that it does also like equally look very different and odd and unique. And so I think it could work. I'm going to try moving ahead with this as it is for right now. If it's just really not working out, if it's really looking ugly, you know, I'll have to just go ahead and strip it, and then we'll deal with that. It won't be too big of a deal. Oh, and by the way, the other adjustment that I had to make was that this red Azuki color was just a little too dark and a little too deep, like a dark violet red for my taste, I think. It's definitely a unique color and could work well, but it was just a little too much, so I went ahead and gave this a somewhat light coat here of this desert yellow Dogram paint here, also from Gaia Notes, and where you can still see a little bit of that kind of pinkness showing through. So I didn't give it like a really super thorough coating of the desert yellow, so that it still kind of has that little bit of funky color accent to it, but I think this color will be a lot better fit here for the project overall. Okay guys, anyway, skipping ahead to the final result here just to keep the video from going on for too long, but here is the finished result of the kit, and I'm pretty happy with it. So basically all I did to kind of finish it off was giving it a coat of wash with the Mr. Weathering color, and just kind of over all of the armor pieces and everything, and then just kind of clean that up a bit, going back and adding a bit more in some areas, and just kind of cleaning that up. And then one thing that I tried on this that I've actually not really ever tried before, but it felt kind of appropriate considering the scale of this, where this is not necessarily something that I think would look as good on something like a Gunpla kit or something, but this being 1/12 scale, I tried some like brush splattering or spraying. I'm not exactly sure what the right word is, but basically using that Mr. Weathering color. I'm using a couple of different colors of the Mr. Weathering color paint, and then just basically like spraying it off the tip of the brush, off the tip of the paintbrush, just with my finger, just kind of splattering it there onto the kit, just to give it a kind of dirty, like mud sprayed kind of look to it. And I think that it actually came out looking pretty good. I'm actually quite happy with how that ended up looking. And other than that, just finish this off with just a simple circular wooden base there to base it up and have it all mounted here. That wooden base piece just basically being a wooden coaster, just turned upside down. Very simple, easy, but again, I think it fits pretty well with this work, just being something that was really kind of very experimental from the start. So it's a really cool kit, I will say, just kind of in closing, in summary on this kit. It looks really good in all black, and it was really tempting when thinking about like what kind of color I wanted to do with this, to do it in like all white or all silver or something like that. So I think like a single tone, basically kind of very close to how the kit is originally, being all black, something similar to that I think would look good. What I wanted to do with this was just something a little bit different, a little bit more funky, like I talked about before. And so the color scheme, I mean, it is what it is, for better or worse. I'm not sure if I like really love it or not, but I think it came out looking okay. What happened with the shield was kind of unfortunate, but I'm also kind of okay with how that came out looking as well. I wasn't sure how that would really end up looking, but I actually do kind of like the fact that it's kind of much more subdued now, just kind of in the way that it looks. And I think just with it being like kind of how the clarity of that was just kind of ruined a bit, it kind of goes well with the fact that I was ultimately planning on doing a little bit of weathering on this anyway. If I wanted to have this as like a super clean build, then I'd want the shield to look like super clean. But since I'm going for a little bit of like little bit of weathered look to it, then I think the shield ending up looking how it does, I think kind of works well enough. I'm happy with it. So I wouldn't exactly call it like a happy accident, but an acceptable accident, a passable accident. Oh, another thing you'll also notice is that I left off the clear black parts on the sides of the wrist as well. When I was putting the kit kind of back together after everything was done, those parts being the only parts in like clear black, it just kind of felt like they would have been like a little bit visually distracting to the rest of the kit overall, being all kind of a little bit kind of dirty looking and the weathering on it and everything, and then having these like bright, shiny, clear black parts on the side of the wrist. I thought, well, it probably would look a bit strange, so I actually left them off. I'm just going to leave them off permanently just because I feel like those parts just really kind of aren't necessary to what I ended up doing with mine here. But anyway, guys, as always, I'm anxious to hear your thoughts about what you think of the build down in the comment section below. So let me know your thoughts. What do you like about it? What do you not like? What do you like about just the kit in general too? Is this a kit that you've picked up for yourself, or one that you would like to pick up for yourself after seeing this video, or one that you're not particularly interested in for, you know, X or Y reason? Let me know in the comment section. And of course, if you guys do want to pick up the kit for yourself, or the Gale Hound out before it, or anything else from Kotobukiya, of course, you can check the link in the video description to USA Gundam Store. We do have both of the two kits from this series in stock now, I believe, and then of course lots of other great stuff from Kotobukiya, so definitely check out that stuff there. And as always, guys, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like. I really appreciate all your support. Make sure that you're subscribed as well. I really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. Until next time, hope y'all have a great day. Hope you enjoyed this build, and I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.